22 million black victims of Americanism are waking up, and they're gaining a new political consciousness, becoming politically mature. And as they develop this political maturity, they're able to see the recent trends in these political elections. Any minority that has a block of votes that stick together is in a strategic position. Either way you go, that's who gets it. You're in a position to determine who go to the White House and who stay in the doghouse. You're the one who has that power. You and I have never seen democracy. All we've seen is hypocrisy. When we open our eyes today and look around America, we see America not through the eyes of someone who has enjoyed the fruits of Americanism. We see America through the eyes of someone who has been the victim of Americanism. We don't see any American dream. We've experienced only the American nightmare. We haven't benefited from America's democracy. We've only suffered from America's hypocrisy. And the generation that's coming up now can see it and are not afraid to say it. 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 And are not afraid to say it.
And are not afraid to say it. Welcome, welcome, welcome. You are tuned into Black Westchester Presents the People Before Politics radio show. This is episode 335. Welcome everybody to the show. As you may or may have not seen earlier, we did a special edition of our Black Westchester Power Hour. Damon and I addressed the teenage girl who was stabbed to death Friday in Mount Vernon. Everybody was asking us to address it, so Damon wanted to address it. So we addressed it a little bit, and Jamal Bowman joined us for the conversation for a minute, and it was great. You can find the link on blackwestchester.com on the front page. Today, Dr. Bob is not with us. He is handling some personal business stuff that he had to handle, so he will not be able to make the show. But we do have a very special guest host for the show, Paul Anthony Cuesta. Did I actually say your name right?
Yeah, you could say it's President Cuesta. You could say that. Yep,
okay.
You got it, AJ.
Actually, it's the first time I just say Paul all the time. I never even.
Yeah, it's all right.
Yes,
it's yes. Name keeps me humble.
yes. So, welcome to the show. I think the topic of the show today is environmental justice. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
So real quick before we get into it and introduce the guest, for everybody listening and for me, what is environmental justice? Why should we care about it? Why is it important? Just break it down for us real quick.
Yeah, wow. So first, AJ, I just want to thank you and Black Westchester Magazine for providing us with this forum to be able to discuss this. Episode 335. That's a legacy, man. And really, we're really happy to be able to have this conversation on environmental justice. So you're going to have some experts that are going to break it down, maybe a little bit better than I could break it down. But I, in my personal humble opinion, view environmental justice as anything that's depriving us as Homo sapiens with a healthy environment or the conditions that we need to be able to have the American dream experience in terms of pursuit or just to live with overall dignity, in terms of what do you need? You need water, you need access to food, you need access to shelter. If you're living in a community that has compromised air quality, like Westchester County does, or if you have a community that has compromised water infrastructure, those are two basic elements you need to be able to survive throughout the, while you're throughout your day. And, on top of that, with issues for indoor air quality, people are through the bathroom that's probably infested with bed bugs or rodents, so you have mold in your bathroom ceiling and things like that. These are things that kind of impact you and put you in an environmental justice community. Or also things and access to green space, maybe sewage infrastructure issues. The list goes on, but it's about what are you experiencing that is preventing you from living a life and living in a community with a healthful environment. So that's how I view environmental justice, especially if you're comparing what you're having, what you're experiencing in a community that is adjacent to you is not experiencing, but yet you can look into the historical redlining issues and see how those situations popped up too.
So for the first hour, we have two guests that are in the green room. I'm going to introduce them, tell us who they are, and I will bring them on the screen.
Yeah, so I guess our first two guests is Raya Salt. First of our two guests is Raya Salter, Professor Raya Salter, if I may be formal. Raya Salter is an attorney, consultant, educator, and with a focus on energy and climate justice. She's a professor of law at Cardozo Law School and is a founder of the Energy Justice Collective. She's a member of the New York State Climate Action Council, where she supports our state's achievement of its climate and energy agenda from the passage of the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. Raya is also a member of the City of New Rochelle, founding member of the City of New Rochelle Sustainability Committee, formerly called the Advisory Committee on Ecology and Natural Resources. Our second speaker is also a native of New Rochelle, a member of the New Rochelle community. I actually went to elementary school with this gentleman right here, Blaze Lightfoot Jones Yellen. He's an urbanist, organizer, and educator born and raised from New Rochelle. He's a graduate of Cornell University and is a member of faculty in sustainability and environmental justice at CUNY John Jay. He sits in the advisory boards of the New York Harbor School at college and the Pano Democratic Outdoor School. Mr. Jones-Yellen is committed to being involved with the New Rochelle community. He organized the inaugural environmental racism tour last year, and it has also supported recovery impacted communities in Far Rockaway, New York, after Superstorm Sandy. So these are some powerhouse people. I'm pretty sure they have a better definition of environmental justice than I do. But AJ, seriously, thank you and Black Westchester Magazine for allowing us to have this conversation. Usually it's environmental organizations that are having these conversations, but if you look at the board of directors, and not too many people that look like us on them. So really, thank you for allowing us to have this conversation.
Absolutely. We usually deal with a lot more with the politics and, crime and punishment and systematic racism. And I would like to touch upon more topics like this. It's just sometimes there's just not enough to get it in. And Paul has been very diligently contacting me over the last couple of months that we need to do a show about this. And I have kind of been kicking the can down the road because there have been so many other things that I had to focus on. But today, this is what the whole show is dedicated to. Welcome to our guests. And like I said, I'm going to let Paul take the lead. So I'm going to let you ask the questions and get the conversation started.
So I guess we'll start off with you, Raya, and then we'll go to you, Blaze. But in your humble opinions, what is environmental justice?
Well, hi. First, I have to say hi because I'm so excited, and that intro got me so pumped. I was like, I was getting really excited. So I'm so glad to be here. I'm so excited. Thank you so much, AJ. Thank you so much, Paul. We didn't get to really introduce Paul, but Paul is really a leader in this space, especially for Black people in Westchester. So I just want to give props to Paul as well. And I do have a legal definition of environmental justice that I do like to share that I like to think helps folks understand, what it's about. So, and really its roots are really in the civil rights movement or the early area of Black history in our Constitution, because we talk about equal protection. So equal protection. So this means that when it comes to environmental harms, we are supposed to be protected using the environmental laws, right? We should have equal protection of the environmental laws. If our water is bad, we shouldn't not get that enforced because of race, because we are Black. Now, what it also means is there needs to be an equal distribution of environmental benefits and environmental harms. So to what Paul was saying, you can't just have clean water in the white neighborhood and not have clean water in the Black neighborhood. That's not right. When you have that type of unequal burden and you have a lack of enforcement of environmental laws, a lack of protection based on race, that is environmental racism, and that is environmental injustice. And another point I'll make is that we have to look at these things, as Paul mentioned, redlining, et cetera, as a legacy of harms over time. We call that cumulative impacts, and that's important to environmental justice definition. So that's just a little, since I'm a lawyer, I've given you the legal definition.
Thank you so much, Raya. Thank you so much. I actually did type a little bit of that down. I have my computer here. So thank you so much, because that's actually, it's a really great definition. And I guess we'll give the floor to you, Blaze. In your opinion, what is the definition of environmental justice?
Sure. And thank you, Paul. Thank you, AJ, Raya. It's great to see you. It's really nice that Black Westchester is hosting this forum, and I'm really glad to represent for the people of New Rochelle and beyond. Raya, obviously, great job with the technical definition. I think, to break it down, for me, it comes down to this phenomenon in the United States where you can predict, you can look up the zip code that someone lives in, and you can predict their life outcomes based on the zip code they live in. And that's because of this unequal distribution of environmental benefits and harms. So you can determine based on where someone in this country, there's enough unequal distribution of environmental benefits and harms that it's, I have pets all around me. You're probably jumping. Sorry about that. You determine, based on how, based on where you live, and how long your life expectation will be, and what types of health complications might arise in your future, because we know that pollution, the environmental hazards, and the environmental benefits, the clean water, areas with clean air, there's such an unequal distribution that we see such dramatic differences in life outcomes for people who live in, let's say, Black and brown people who are living predominantly close to environmental hazards, and wealthier, whiter communities that are living in areas with higher concentrations of parks and green spaces and healthier living environments. And we can just, on those metrics alone, we know that Black communities are forced into areas with more degraded environments. They're forced to live in areas with more degraded environments. And to Raya's point, a lot of this can be traced back to the legacy of federal policies when it came to infrastructure investment, when it came to acts that helped to promote home ownership amongst certain populations and not amongst others. We talk about redlining. So there's a history of intentional segregation, right? It's legalized segregation. We've all seen the photos of the white water fountain next to the colored water fountain. And the colored water fountain looks like a piece of junk. It's dirty, it's rusty. And the white water fountain is a pristine, clean drinking fountain. And this is a micro example of how Black communities have been forced to deal with environmental hazards, whether that be a rusty, dirty water fountain or an oil or gas plant or incinerator or bus depot in your neighborhood, versus the clean white drinking fountain with the park in the neighborhood. I'm sort of using an illustration here, but Raya did a great job summing it up. I'm just building on her definition. I'll stop there.
You're muted, Paul. You're muted.
It has to happen once, right? It has to happen once. You pretty much started touching into the next question I plan to ask, and I'll give the floor to you, Blaze, of some of the history of environmental racism, and especially some issues that you might have been exposed to here in Westchester County.
Sure. So, history of environmental racism, I think it traces back to, as long as there's been a history of racism, there's been a history of environmental racism in this country, for sure. So the modern era of environmental justice, I think, can be traced back to the Great Migration in a certain sense, in the influx of Black people moving out of the South and into predominantly white areas, led to a backlash and a much more formalized system of harsh segregation to keep Black people in their place and to keep the nice things for the white people. And that was based out of a fear of, integration And so you see, in the 20th century, the 1900s, really, the late 1800s, after the Civil War, after Reconstruction falls apart, millions and millions of Black people begin moving north. And then white people have to deal with all of these new people that they didn't want to live next to intentionally. Legally, they segregated them, and they began systematically, to enact policies and make planning and development decisions. We've heard of the urban renewal programs of the 20th century, the redlining programs post Great Depression, and the sort of stimulus programs for GIs and for white Americans that were not extended to Black Americans. There's a legacy, I'm glossing over a large part of American history of the last 150 years, but these were systemic, let's say institutional, federal and regional and local policy and planning decisions that created the legally segregated environments that still largely exist to this day. We're still largely living in segregated cities. And I'll pause there. There's a lot more, obviously, you could go into in each of these areas.
Thank you so much. And Maya, the floor is yours. Yeah.
Not just to give another example. And so it's just this environmental overlay is something that we're looking more and more at. And it's unfortunate that sometimes an academic has to make a study before people accept something as true that we all know to be true. But the environmental impacts in terms of air quality, indoor air quality, health disparities, they trace back to that same redlining. So this environmental impact. And so another example is, I don't think you can be Black in this country without having either you or somebody in your family impacted by this issue, and also the prison issue. They're all interconnected. For instance, we all know or have in our family, one of the babies ate the lead paint. One of the babies ate the lead paint. We know when they eat the lead paint, they got issues in school. Sometimes they end up tied up in the prison system behind that. I don't know. You can't be Black in this country without knowing about this, because of this segregation that Blaze is talking about. And this piece in terms of why aren't they enforcing that lead paint been needs to been out of houses. Benny. And we're still looking that the real estate industry is conspiring to make sure that they don't have to, for the asbestos and the lead paint, they don't have to clean that up. That's happening still to this day. That is environmental racism, injustice, because it is happening on the basis of race.
That's cool. Go ahead, Paul.
Now, do you want any feedback on that? Like, you want to, it's a lot of days laid on,
No, sometimes you need to sit back and let the experts speak. And I tell people, a lot of people think I just know everything about everything. I learn a little something from every show, from every guest, from every article. So this is something I want to know more about. I'm interested in, and so I'm sitting here like everyone else and just watching the show.
Yeah. So I guess the next question is: do you have any specific examples here in Westchester that are environmental justice issues that my fellow members of the Black community should become more aware of?
Sure, I can jump in. I would say, we're in a period of hot conversation around infrastructure investment and building back better, and all of these buzzwords. Infrastructure investment has been one of the key, I would say, not Trojan horse per se, but environmental injustice has often, been ridden into our communities on the Trojan horse of some sort of infrastructure investment. So in the past, Raya, are you raising your hand here?
I'm just saying, yep.
Yeah.
That part.
So part of what we were highlighting this past fall with the environmental racism tour in New Rochelle is historic infrastructure investments that led to the racialized, segregated and frankly, underinvested, gutted Black community in New Rochelle. And I would say this example extends across Westchester and across New York State and probably across the country in many ways. And what we were specifically looking at were the highways. And when were the highways put in? What was there before the highways were put in? What did the highways pave over? And what is the legacy that was left after the highways were put in? And we saw in New Rochelle specifically that I-95, Memorial Highway, New Rock City, which was formerly the Macy's Downtown Redevelopment Project, these were all situated directly on top of the historic Black community. The old original Black community was unified in geography across that entire area of New Rochelle, from Lincoln Avenue to City Park to Main Street to the downtown area was all Black community and all connected. And if you visit now, you see that highways cut the community down the middle. They segregated the downtown from the Lincoln Avenue area. City Park was totally cut off when they got rid of the trolleys and reduced the bus service to that area. I-95 also cuts between City Park and downtown New Rochelle. So there's it's like put a huge fissure through the heart of the Black community. And could not really put a fissure through historically white communities at the time. They had a big outcry. They didn't want the highway through their neighborhood, and the highway didn't go through their neighborhood. So I would look across Westchester County. I would especially look at I-95 and the Arterial Highway Act, which was the internal. I-95 is a federal highway. There were also state highways that were developed shortly thereafter, around the same time. This is mid 20th century, 1960s, early 1970s. And where were these highways placed? What was there before, and what's there now? And you can piece together, what could have been a really, you can imagine if it happened in New Rochelle, it was happening elsewhere. This is the 60s. Black people are moving north. Black people are uprising. And there needs to be some there was certainly a backlash in many ways, and this was one of the ways I in my opinion, that the federal government was able to successfully, hurt the Black community by demolishing them in favor of federal highway programs.
So two things. One, Paul, do you have something else on, like your phone or anything? I'm getting feedback from you. If you have another device on, just turn the volume down. Okay, that's one. Two, I didn't know this comes under the heading of environmental justice. Mark from LoHUD, and he's now with the Post. Before he left LoHUD, he wrote an article, and he was about to work on a series that I was going to help him with about racism is built right into our highways. And he goes in further, not just what you're talking about, but further going up in Greenberg and all of that going up there and the building and going into Long Island, how the Southern State bridges were purposely built smaller so that buses from the city could not travel and bring busload of Black people out there. And so this is something that I've been doing stuff, but I didn't know this falls under environmental justice. And also, there's a documentary, Level in Lincoln, or something like that. And my cousin, my dad passed in September. I went to Atlanta. One of my cousins came by the hotel to hang out with me and was telling me about how Lincoln Park used to be a big school that a lot of the Black people went to and stuff. But during this process of Memorial Highway, they leveled that, and then they did segregation and made them go to other schools. And there's supposed to be a documentary about that, and I think my cousin, another cousin of mine, Phyllis Hollis Cole, is actually in the documentary because she was one of the students who actually was segregated. And my cousin Peter Robinson, Wayne Robinson, Senior, told me about it. So that's something I'm very much interested in, and it's a story I wanted to follow up on. But again, I never knew for myself that these things fall under the heading of environmental justice. I just,
let me jump in here and see, that was so important what you were saying about this. That's when we start looking at it from that block by block level, and you get those personal stories. Because here is what came with those highways was a lot of things. Just the emissions from the cars on the highway, PM, actual bad air quality. But you know what also came in, and this goes to this zoning issue. You got waste incineration plants that came in with those highways. You got increased zoning for industrial purposes, and then you get the toxics in the pollution, and that's how that environmental justice thing starts coming in. And then to Blaze's point, what it is a sacrifice zone. When he talked about using progress, economic progress as a reason to do this in Black communities, because they say, look at that community. They demonize a community. They got crime. They have low employment, low education. They need this type of economic development. But what's really happening? You change the code to make something that should be residential, manufacturing or municipal, and then you end up with people living next to manufacturing sites that are polluted, more trucking, and more cars that come in from that, in addition to the highways. And the environmental burden starts doubling and tripling. And something that's really, really important is that the state I put out a map just 2 weeks ago, identifying who in our county, in the state, but who in our county has both environmental vulnerability from these factors and also climate vulnerability. And here's what I'm telling people: Yonkers in particular is more saturated with poison sites, manufacturing zones, and also climate vulnerability because of the coast than any area in New York State. So that's just Yonkers, Mount Vernon, New Rochelle. And look, you can tell me, right, AJ, what are the other towns?
Greenberg with 119 and separate, there were several other
anywhere Black people are. Anywhere Black people are.
The article in Low HUD, I will try to find that and share it in the link. It discusses all of that. The Bronx was very, very heavily hit and the breaking up. So it was the Bronx, and then it started up into Westchester, but also the highways in Long Island, like the Southern State, and Robert Moses, and I forgot who the other one was that built these highways. They did this with this in mind. You know what I mean? And it never went through the affluent neighborhoods. It always went through, and then sometimes it's separated. They say the other side of the tracks. Well, it's actually the other side of the highway because it separated us. You know what I'm saying? So you had all the resources here and none here, and all of those type of things. And I'm just getting a little more into that a little bit. So this is actually great because I didn't know. Paul talks about environmental justice all the time. I never knew these things fell under environmental justice. So
exactly right.
I'm learning something here as well.
And it's also how the county has things set up for basic essential services. There's a reason why the sewage treatment plants in Southwest Yonkers, there's a reason why Wheelabrator is in Peekskill. Take the waste incinerator and put in Scarsdale or Pelham and see what happens, or take the sewage treatment plant and put in Hastings or Croton and we'll see what happens. These are things that we know that they don't want this in certain communities. So why are we going to impose upon it in other communities without having those forward-thinking dialogues of implementing more sustainable waste management or more sustainable sewage management? Because that's really about what it needs to be done, especially through innovative zero waste educational resources, or really being held accountable with what the changes that need to be made. If this is happening in Westchester County, which I think is one of the counties which is, pretty much the American dream in a way, per se, where you have proximity to New York City, where you still can have like a suburban house and things like that. Imagine what's happening in the other communities that don't have I guess, a Black Westchester magazine or something per se to really talk about those issues.
And that was the point that I really wanted to make. And I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I was so like, okay, the Bronx, right, is famous for this, right? But to Paul's point, you think you come up to Westchester and you getting, the clean air and the this and that. If you are Black, no, that is not true. Yonkers, New Rochelle, Mount Vernon, White Plains, Portchester, every single place and the county is mapped it. When you look at the map, anywhere Black people are, you have this pollution. So you think that it's an illusion. We do demonize, these other we demonize communities. This is our community. This is our community. And we are living in poison and poor air and don't even sometimes know it.
And with what are the lines that they run and that cause cancer or something that they run in our neighborhoods? There's stories, I've been hearing plenty of stories about that, where people are getting cancer from the lines they run overhead. I don't know if it's a telephone, huh?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to, but better believe it if it's if it's poison.
I don't know if it's the electrical lines. They're not telephone lines only. They're electrical lines for something, and they worried about the towers they were putting up for the 5G and all of that stuff, and I, they're saying, we're getting stuff coming from that, and it's our communities that are being affected. One of the things Black Westchester tries to do is to educate our communities, because this type of information doesn't normally trickle down to us, one, and two, they know they're allowed to get away with it because we don't know, where those other communities know, but oh, no, you're not putting that in our community because this, and this. And there's less pushback from our communities, mostly because we don't know. So
I think that's why it's so important that we're having this kind of conversation now. And I think coming back to why I started with the infrastructure investment and building back better, because we're about to undergo a whole another $1 trillion, infrastructure development process across the country. And if Black people are not at the table with this kind of mindset to participate in the conversation, development decisions are going to get made without this environmental racism, environmental justice, or even the history, addressing the historical, wrongs, never mind thinking, future facing about Black people moving forward. These plans are going to get approved and the construction is going to begin, and it has the potential to reinforce existing racist, urban planning practices across the country. So unless, Black people are getting hip to the impacts of this kind of infrastructure investment, and they're going to determine the look of our communities for the next 50, 100 years right now.
And with the growth of the Latino population, I like to add Black and brown communities.
Yeah, Black and brown, for sure.
Because in a city like Yonkers, Latinos have now become the #1 demographic group right now.
That's right.
They're more Latinos than white people in Yonkers right now. Latino is the #1 group right now.
And plenty of Latinos are Black people, and Black and brown is one and the same, really, in my mind.
Right. So I always try to throw that in sometimes because, some of our fights, I interviewed a salsa legend a long time ago, Willie Colon. And, he's a community activist, and he was talking about the activists in the 70s and the 60s. And he was like, the Black and brown people worked a lot together. And then we allowed the government and everybody to divide us, not even divide us with just Black and brown, but to divide us within our groups, brown against brown and Black against Black. And he said, but back in those days, there were a lot of Latinos standing with the Martin Luther Kings and all of it. They were fighting. They were fighting too, but you never hear that in the history. They never share that history, and they divide us, and we allow ourselves to be divided and, take each other out too. So,
we got to work together. I 100% agree. Everybody's future is at stake. right now, as far as I'm concerned, with the environmental crisis, climate crisis, crisis on top of crisis all over the place, economic crisis. If we're not working together, we're working against our best interests at this point. I agree.
So does environmental justice include this climate, what do they call climate, whatever that we're about to face, that if we don't get a hold of it, it's going to affect our climate change. It's going to affect our children and our children's children. And would that be in environmental justice, the umbrella as well?
Yep, 100%. And in fact, as it would not probably surprise, it was Black and brown environmental justice advocates in the US and also throughout the world that really jump-started this movement that became the climate justice movement, because that only came up when people realized, right, in the 80s that, that the emissions, the climate change was causing this harm to the planet. So 100% climate justice, the idea of climate and environmental justice are very intertwined, because guess what? And Blaze can share some of the, and I'm sure a lot of listeners, some of the experiences after Hurricane Sandy. But we just had this last thing, Maria, that hit us all in New Rochelle. The exact same issue, that same segregation. If you are Black and brown, you live in an area that is more climate vulnerable, you live in an area, if you are probably more vulnerable because you have a lower income and also pre-existing health conditions. So going back to that Yonkers example, it's no surprise, right? You live right in that slice of Yonkers, that lowland, right? Highland is where the white people be, right? You in that lowland, you got these rivers, and you're next to all that toxicity too from the municipal waste, etc. When increasing storms are coming and hitting again and again, your house is going to be the one that is flooded. You are going to be the one who loses your neighborhood and your housing. That is where that climate piece comes in. And that's what the state's recent map, that's why they look at both environmental burden and climate vulnerability. Won't surprise you, all along the shore in New Rochelle, right? All the lowlands in New Rochelle, Mount Vernon, we are some of the most climate, and particularly Yonkers, vulnerable in the entire state.
And then we got the sewer issue that in Mount Vernon, which is leaking into the waterways going into the Bronx and other places. What
happens when there's a major storm? It gets every. I won't curse, but I think you get what I'm saying.
Oh well, yes, and we're not. This is internet. We don't have no FCC rules, so if you had to and it's necessary, you can. I'm just saying. So
I do want to talk about that too, AJ, because the city of Mount Vernon has been on the headlines for the, sewage leakage happening into bodies of water, such as the Sound. But a lot of the other municipalities along that Sound are doing this, having similar issues. New Rochelle, Mamaroneck, Rye, it's for some reason it's only Mount Vernon that's being put in the Lowhead articles and things like that. So
New York City's sewer system is designed to overflow into the waterways, the surrounding waterways. Combined sewage outflows, a CSO. You can look this up. The system is so old and has never been, talk about infrastructure that has never been built back better. The New York City sewer system is designed so that when it rains, and if the system gets overwhelmed with a sudden surge of water, it is designed to overflow that excess sewage into the surrounding waterways.
So I was saying earlier, I don't know if Blaze heard me. So Dr. Bob had some work he had to do. He's a professor. He had to do some stuff for class or whatever. So he wasn't here, but he gave me 2 videos. One is of Raya, I think it's a Glasgow, and another one, I guess, is a press conference. I wanted to play them when it was appropriate. So since I have them loaded up.
Sure, that would be great. Do you need me to?
Well, this first one is the Glasgow Agreement. I think that's what it says.
All right, and I'll give just a little context, is because as people, Black and brown people, we need to be involved in all of these conversations, the international conversations that are happening and the local conversations. And so I went to Glasgow to the climate conference, and yes, I was speaking to how little progress we made at the climate conference.
And here we go.
That already. So we're in deep trouble We've been in deep trouble for years.
You know what? It wasn't at the beginning.
Now the conference is tied up. You know, the British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson's given it about 6 out of 10, just above that in terms of success. What score would you give it?
I think that most activists and I think everyday folks who care about climate change and our planet would give it perhaps a 1 or 2 out of 10 best.
Why 1 when, as Prime Minister Boris Johnson said, this signals the death knell for coal, and that is a huge step forward?
Unfortunately, signaling the death knell, you reported it, because of pushback from India and other countries. Instead of phasing out coal, the agreement says phase down. There are no commitments to phase out coal, and it's very unfortunate.
OK, I mean, what would you want to happen? Because a lot of the activists are saying we're going to have this conversation in, you know, another 12 months' time, start again. Do you think we could actually improve on 1 out of 10?
I think we have to. I think that our very lives depend upon it. You know, the other, I guess, bright spot is that the agreement said that countries must strengthen their nationally determined contributions, what they agreed to at Paris, by the end of next year. That's a bit of a bright spot because that's earlier than they would have had to strengthen those commitments than before. However, the Paris Agreement commitments do not get us to that 1.5 degrees C temperature limit that we know we must keep to in order to avoid catastrophic climate change. The Paris Agreement commitments take us over that already. So we're in deep trouble. We've been in deep trouble for years, and strengthening the commitments by next year is a hopeful step, but is not the step that I think most climate activists and scientists wanted to see.
The view seems to be that China and India need to look at themselves and ask themselves some tough questions. I mean, what would you say to them?
This, I think, gets to the point of why climate justice is so important. We know that the United States is historically the largest committer, the one who has done the most to contribute to climate change, while we know that China is now, and India are now the highest emitters. And so this piece about climate justice, this piece about helping poorer countries make the transition, helping poorer countries with loss and damage for historic loss is really important, because India is saying, how can we phase out coal when we have development concerns? And while it's urgent that they do, they have a point.
You know, the COP president said China and India are going to have to explain themselves to the most climate vulnerable countries in the world. They know that this is deeply unpopular, but they're not going to be persuaded, it seems.
It's not something it's clearly problematic. China, India, the United States, the world needs to come together on climate. I don't think that it's any one nation's fault. It's a failure of humanity to come together in an emergent crisis where we need our leaders to show up and act on climate urgently now, and they have failed us.
Albie, it's very good to see you, and thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much.
So I wanted to share that, let you talk about it, and I wanted to brag a little bit. You know, we got somebody on the show that be on the international stage, so I just want to.
And that is really the point I want to make, is because we need to be in these conversations up and down. We need to be in these conversations. That's exactly right. And that's just me speaking to, we're in deep trouble. This issue of climate justice, where climate change is a problem. The wealthy countries who did the most to contribute to it need to help those who did the least. So we have places like Hawaii, we have places like the Marshall Islands, we have in Africa, countries that are suffering now, and the wealthy countries need to do something about it. But that same thing is true within nations. In the United States, the poor and the Black and brown and marginalized are also getting the brunt first and worst.
Okay.
I think for a lot of folks, the global crisis can feel overwhelming. What can we do as individuals to stop the rising seas, on the other side of the world? But, I think the average person, if they can't get, wrap their head around the global, crisis and what can I do about that, I think the average person can start to pay a little more attention to what's happening locally. Just in the last couple of years, I know the city of New Rochelle has, I know several other cities in Westchester and across the country have made commitments, to climate, they've called out the climate emergency. They've made a commitment to addressing the climate emergency. They've made commitments to addressing racism and equity and lots of commitments that our elected officials say that they will do. And yet, year after year, like Raya is saying, we see these international conversations where nearly nothing happens. And they're excited. Boris Johnson and others are very optimistic, and no one's alarmist, and no one's panicking. And, oh, yeah, oil, that's going to phase out in 2050, and we'll figure it out down the line. And, what Raya is saying, what the climate scientists have been saying, is that we don't have time to phase things out slowly over the next 50 years, and that these commitments to serious emissions reduction that are verbal right now, there's nobody holding anybody's feet to the fire. There's no consequences if governments locally or nationally don't meet the expectations and don't fulfill their commitments. The same way there's no consequences if they don't meet their equity commitments or their anti-racism commitments. These are just words until we see some action. And I think politicians, elected officials, and industry leaders will not act without serious pressure coming from regular people. And that means just paying a little bit more attention locally and speaking up a little more locally and saying, look, yes, we know the Maldives are going to be underwater in 10 years, 20 years, no matter what. They're doomed. There's people who are literally doomed. Raya brought up sacrifice zones. There are sacrifice zones in the country and around the world where we just know that those people aren't going to be around. That's it for them. But what we can do locally is really hold our officials, our leaders, ourselves to the commitments that are being made. And this really, I think, as a individual, it's not about stopping your use of turning off your faucet and cutting back on plastic bags. All of that is good and all of that helps, but that's not going to save us at this point. At this point, we need major commitments to be fulfilled on the local, state, regional, national, international levels. And we have elected people into positions. We have selected certain people into positions, and they are not upholding the commitments that they have made to us. And so it's up to us then to say either we're not putting you back in this position, we're taking this power away from you, or we're going to hold your feet to the fire and make sure that you come through on what you said you were going to do for us. And we don't have time to waste. So
it's funny. The first thing that came to mind when you said sacrifice zones, I know I saw a documentary about Hurricane Katrina, about how the water normally would have went over and how it would have been spread out, and the belief that there was charges placed for an explosion for the water to flow specifically to the area that it flowed to save that downtown area. And when they showed a model of how water flows and where the water would have flowed normally, the downtown area, that big area, would have been demolished. But there's belief that there was a purpose explosion or whatever, a charge set to put a hole where it forced water to go. And, this is from scientific models they were showing, like how the water would go and how the water went, and they were trying to explain that. So I thought of that. I would call that a sacrifice zone. Like they sacrificed that to save. So that's where. There's another short clip. I'm going to play it and let y'all speak about it on the other end. Hold on.
Right. I know which one.
Wait, hold up. Okay, there we go.
Thank you, Rev Maloney, for having me here today. My name is Raya Salter. I'm a climate and energy justice attorney and activist, and I sit on New York State's Climate Action Council. We are working to achieve the state's nation-leading goals, which include ending the pollution from this power plant, the area's largest emitter. But New York State cannot do it alone. we need federal action. The Justice and Power Plant Permitting Bill breaks new ground for energy justice in America. The bill is the missing link in federal climate action, as it provides mechanisms to prevent harm from energy infrastructure. It takes what New York state law has done, namely, it recognizes the cumulative harms that Black and Brown communities have historically experienced from power plant pollution and prioritizes addressing it. This means focusing first on ending the pollution from this plant and plants like it. The Justice in Power Plant Permitting Bill calls for community participation and engagement in energy decisions and will help end the concentration of polluting facilities in Black, Brown, and poor communities. Importantly, this bill provides funds for a just transition along with community oversight. I strongly support the Justice and Power Plant Permitting Bill. Without the protections it provides, we risk doubling down on energy injustice instead of turning the tide towards a just transition.
So I'm going to let you address that. Tell us what that was about.
All right. Yes, quickly, I will do so. So people, this is again, people often don't know what this pollution is doing to them and what's going on because they just don't know. So this is in Queens. The largest polluter in the state is in Queens, directly across from Queensbridge houses, specifically the place where Nas, the rapper we know from our generation, literally grew up within.
Mars, Molly Mall, Shantae, Roxanne Shantae, Mobb Deep, like the list goes on and on and on. Yeah.
The list goes on. Directly across the street from where I was standing, the Ravenswood generating plant. We're lucky that they could even breathe and to rap and to play instruments because of the heavy incidence of asthma and other health impacts that come from that plant. There are just under 3 million people in the direct vicinity of the largest polluter in the state. What does that mean? You have asthma, your children have asthma. What does that mean? You miss days at school. You miss days of school. You don't do well in school. You see the domino effect that happens. It's just across the street. And so this particular thing was the federal congresswoman from Queens has put forth a bill that would make it so that you can't just cite these big polluting energy infrastructures in Black and Brown communities where they already have them already. And so there are pushes on the federal level to try and provide some protections. And that's what that's about. And that's the thing, though. Queensbridge, we're in here in Westchester. We're not like that. Yes, we are.
That's why I wanted to show the clip on the global thing and, this thing in Queens. And also one of the famous Queensbridge residents who is admitted that he has mental health issues. Ron Artest, Meta World Peace. He's from Queensbridge housing as well. And, he has he's wrestled with mental health. I'm not saying this because of that, but I'm just saying he's from that area as well.
Yeah.
I just want to show, sometimes, when we post this on the website, it's digital, it's on the internet. So we have people outside of, Lower Westchester and sometimes outside of the state even. And I wanted to show what I find out in our community, we do you'll tell a story about New Rochelle and Yonkers, Greenburgh, White Plains, Mount Vernon. Oh, that's New Rochelle. That doesn't affect us. And you'll hear a story about Mount Vernon. Oh, that's just Mount Vernon. Or you hear something. Oh, that's Peekskill. That's all the way up there. But all of these things affect all of us. And you know what I mean? And I was trying to tie that in. And even people in Queens and people globally, this is going on all over the place in Black communities and Black and Brown communities everywhere. And poor white communities. There are some poor white communities that don't get no better love than we do. You know what I'm saying? They just fight. Yeah. So
that part.
So AJ, because here in Westchester, with the problems that that were mentioned before in terms of the sewage treatment plant, in Yonkers, or the incinerator, Wheelabrator, the energy conversion center, they call it technically. It's supposedly converts some energy, but the carbon environmental impact is devastating. Those are it's everyone. 70% of all sewage in Westchester gets treated in Yonkers. So people that literally are in City of Rye that flush their toilets having it treated in Yonkers, and everyone's garbage is shipped off to Peekskill for incineration. So these are community-based services that we're just turning a blind eye of what's happening once it leaves, once it gets picked up twice every week, in front of our houses or something like that. So, so that should really call upon the antithesis of communities getting more involved and, having those conversations of what can we do to help mitigate the impact, because that if it was happening to us, we wouldn't stand for it. Blaze, what was a Webster rule? Do to others what you'd like to have done to you. That's really what it's about. It's really about, you got to treat others, the way you're supposed to be treated. And that really is real equity within this space, especially if we're trying to not only combat environmental justice issues, but also combat climate change, because we know that when shit hits the fan, it's going to be the EJ communities that are going underwater first, that are going to start imploding on a level where you're not even going to be able to drive your car down the streets anymore. You might have to get a canoe or something like that. Things are really going to get bad in these communities because of how things are systematically set up as an unfair disadvantage for those residents in those communities.
Now you joke
in our communities.
After Maria, I've seen some videos of some people driving with some canoes in New Rochelle and some other places because the water was that big. They were literally in a little boat going down, traveling. So we've actually seen that in our recent past. So just times that by how much more it would be, we don't address the situation. For people who want, this is too big of a topic to capture in an hour or even 2 hours. For people that are, like I'm learning a lot about that this stuff falls under environmental justice. Is there websites they can go to or follow you all on social media, or how they can find out more about this, or better yet, what can they do to get more involved, if y'all can speak to that?
I'll just quickly say, everybody, you can definitely follow me. I am Climate Auntie on Instagram. I invite everybody I am your Climate Auntie. We could be climate family. We all climate family. So there's that. We can definitely share links to more resources about this topic. There's never been a better time to get involved in this issue. There is so much action happening. Folks can definitely reach out to me to learn more about that. But I want to pass it back to Paul and Blaze.
Yeah, Blaze, you go ahead.
No, I think I'm obviously on social media at Blaze Lightfoot. You can connect with me online at blazelightfoot.com. Feel free to reach out if topics that came up in this conversation are of interest to you. I have plenty of resources that I'm happy to share with folks. I would say a couple of books that touch on some of what we discussed today. A popular one that's been making the rounds is called The Color of Law, and that gives you it's dense, but it'll give you a sense of how the country was racialized using the law, segregated and otherwise. The Color of Law, and for the New York area folks, if you really want to get into a lot of this, development over the last 100 years, you brought up a guy, Robert Moses. He was the guy, and there's a major book that documents sort of his whole career. It's called The Power Broker. That's another dense read. But there's lots of material about environmental justice available online.
Wait, we're having a rally. We're having a rally. You're going to hear more about the rally in the next hour, but we're having a rally on the 23rd at 3:00. We are having a rally in New Rochelle. So it's going to be an environmental racism tour and rally. And so some of the stuff that Blaze was talking about, we're going to talk about that. We're going to walk around, and it's going to be good. Where is it? Echo Street, where the new Starbucks is going to be in New Rochelle at 3:00. We having a rally. I wanted to say that.
And I was just, as y'all said that, I just picked up my phone and I am following y'all on Instagram from my 3 accounts. So both of y'all. So you'll see the little alerts. We're following you now. So yeah.
Woohoo!
Before we get into the next guest, anything we didn't ask you that you want to speak on? Anything y'all, any last words or anything like that?
The last thing I'd say, we having a rally. I'm so glad that you're bringing up these topics. It's also all these issues. All our people here. We have people in Haiti, in Puerto Rico, in the Dominican Republic, in the these also our islands are under threat as well. So just that there's so many reasons. It's a big topic and it can be overwhelming, but there's so many reasons to tune in and dial in. And we have a rally.
Yeah, definitely show up to the rally, April 23rd, Earth Day rally in New Rochelle. I would also add that this is the time when decisions are being made that are going to affect the next 100 years, 50 to 100 years. And so it might seem like these issues are far off, or the sea level isn't going to rise for a while, or we're not going to feel the impacts for a while. But the decisions that we're making now, the planning and development decisions in our communities today, right now, infrastructure, downtown development, all of that is going to lay the groundwork, literally, for the landscape that we're going to have to deal with for the next 50 to 100 years. And if that landscape is designed in a way that reinforces environmental racism, we're going to be on our back foot for the next 50 to 100 years. So we got to get on our front foot now and be a part of the conversation now when they're redeveloping in our communities.
Is there any state legislation that we need to know about that's in process, that we can start calling our state senators and assembly, like, we need this to pass? Is there anything in the works? Is there anything you can tell us about? Or
Yes, quickly, there is a huge amount of things that are happening at the state level. One thing I want to mention, pursuant to our 2019 climate law that was put in place because of climate activists, we created a climate plan and a climate justice plan that is now out for comment. So there's a whole hearing schedule, virtual and in person, where people can show up and say what they think about the plan and learn more about the plan. So there's a lot of different individual bills, but I just want to call out this particular opportunity happening right now in our state and area with the actual climate justice plan that's happening at the state level.
I invite, I don't know if either one of y'all like to write, but if you just want to pick up a pen and write something that you feel that our community needs to know, please feel free. I will definitely publish it on the website and in the newspaper and help get the word out. And I said, I'm following y'all. And if there's anything else y'all need to get out, contact Paul and or email me, blackwestchester@gmail.com. I'll give you my personal information and y'all can contact me if y'all need to.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Okay, we are going into the next hour of the show. I am going to play a quick promo, and then we're going into our next hour.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Oh, and I so forgot to tell y'all, this is broadcasting on my Facebook page, and y'all could have shared it on your Facebook page.
I did. I heard about it. I did.
So that your people can watch on your page. So, I mean, you can still share it, and it'll go tonight or tomorrow. It'll be on blackwestchester.com, and I'll send you the link, and y'all can share that out as well.
Cool. I'll be watching the next hour. I'm so excited. Right. Thank you so much, Paul, AJ, Blaze.
Thanks again.
You are now tuned into the People Before Politics radio show, brought to you by the good folks at
Black Westchester. Black Westchester. Black Westchester. Black Westchester. Check the newspaper. Black Westchester. Black Westchester. Black Westchester. Check the newspaper.
Real talk for the community since 2014. Yes. We are back. You are tuned into Black Westchester Presents the People Before Politics radio show, episode 335. We are having a Black Environmental Justice Roundtable, put together by my co-host Paul here and Dr. Bob, who could not be here today. He's working on some stuff for school and everything. So they put this together themselves. I take no credit for it. They put this together. They got the guests and the whole nine. And Paul, I appreciate you being here, holding us down, doing what you do, getting the word out, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, AJ. And congratulations, episode 335 again.
Yes.
Thank you. I want to just stress it again. Thank you so much for providing us with this platform. Usually when these conversations on environmental justice are happening, they're being done by environmental organizations that do not have too much representation of people of color or people that look like us as members of the Black community on their leadership on a board level, board of directors level. So thank you for having this conversation for when we could have this free conversation on the platform of Black Westchester Magazine.
Right. And, sometimes, and it's unfortunate, sometimes for the live showing, because people will watch it later, and then once I put it on the website, they'll watch it over and over and over. But, environmental justice is not like the sexy topic that's going to be like, oh, I gotta tune in today. You know what I'm saying? So I'm really trying to get y'all to nail it. And then when I put it on the website, y'all can really, everybody who wants to know about it and can know about it and share with others how important this environmental justice thing is. And again, there's a lot of things that I've covered and discussed I did not know fall under the umbrella of environmental justice. We have one of our guests here, Dwayne. I will let you introduce him and bring him in. And when the other guests come, I'll let you know.
Yeah, so that sounds good. So I'll introduce Mr. Dwayne Norris, who along with Alejandro Alvarez are the co-founders of Soulful Synergy, where they design training programs and curricula for the evolving marketplace to meet the demand of employers through the lens of diversity, equity. And that's something that Dwayne and Alejandro have been really powerful in terms of leading, is we're seeing this diversification of our county's population through census data. Now Westchester County is over 47% Black, Hispanic, and Asian and Pacific Islander. And they've been doing a really great effort to making sure that representatives in people in those community are being aware of the economic opportunities that have in front of them, especially for a lot of the developments going to be occurring within those communities. So it's talking about people in Mount Vernon that are helping with the sustainable development of Mount Vernon, as well as with Peak Scale in New Rochelle. You don't want to have these renewable energy technicians up in Putnam County and Orange County coming down and taking economic opportunities away from people of color. And this really what Soulful Synergy has been really committed to, making sure that we're equipping people to be the leaders to help with the development within the communities. Alejandro, I've known Alejandro for a pretty long time. We're both Columbia. That's my cousin right there. And Alejandro is one of the founding members of the City of New Rochelle Sustainability Advisory Committee. But Dwayne is a special young brother because he is appointed by County Executive George Latimer to serve on the county's African American Advisory Board. So these are Soulful Synergy has some powerhouse people. Dwayne's doing amazing work, and really thank you, Dwayne, for joining us for this conversation, so we can talk about environmental justice on the and having this dialogue with Black Westchester Magazine.
Thank you for having us, man. Appreciate it. Always good to see you, Paul.
Yes.
Nice to see you, AJ.
No doubt. Now I know the name Soulful Synergy. I've been hearing a lot about it. For those who don't know, what is it? Tell them what you do.
I mean, I think Paul gave a pretty good intro. I'll do my best to kind of give some more context. But he's 100% right. I mean, we've been focused on, community development work with a lens or focus on economics. So workforce development and how that intersects with social, racial, environmental, and economic justice, and really making sure that people that look like us are having access and opportunities to these evolving sectors. You have a lot of work coming in development. You see a city like New Rochelle and you see buildings going up all over the place. And that's happening across different counties and cities, in the Westchester, Putnam, and Hudson Valley region. How do we make sure that we have a participation in that? You see legislation like the CLCPA, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, noting that 40% of investments from New York State are going to Black and brown or what they call disadvantaged communities. That investment is coming. They're going to be putting solar panels. They're going to be putting green roofs. They're going to be doing retrofits in our buildings. How do we make sure that we have a stake in that we are qualified, with the talent and the labor and the knowledge to be able to participate in these projects, and ideally find our way to be prime contractors. A lot of times what happens when this big, rollout of work is coming into these communities is the same old players get the contracts. And then the same old players, say that they're going to get 30% MWBEs and they're going to get, diverse hiring on the projects. And then what they say is they can't find them. They say they can't find qualified MWBEs. So they get a waiver where they no longer have to do that 30% participation, or they get the Section 3 contract and they say they're supposed to hire people locally, but they say we can't find anybody who's qualified to work on these projects, so they get the waiver. We're trying to be in the forefront of that, where they can't get the same old players to do this work and then say that they can't find contracts or talented enough labor to do the work needed on those contracts. So Soulful Synergy for the last 8 years has been doing workforce development in the construction space, the clean energy space. We've trained upwards of 5,000 people in different contracts and different partnerships. Like we work a lot with nonprofit organizations that provide OSHA training, flagger, scaffold, things of that nature. And sometimes we're contracted just to deliver training, and sometimes we're contracted to do training and job placement. We have a contract right now running that's been funded by NYSERDA in partnership with Con Edison, with Willdan, and a number of other small businesses, called our Clean Energy Academy. It's a workforce training for the clean energy industry, specific to doing retrofits in commercial buildings. And so we run that training right now virtually throughout COVID, and have had some really strong successes that I'm sure we'll get to talk about. And so again, our role is really to make sure that our people are prepared for these emerging industries, and making sure that we can participate, with a say in how things are developing, and an economic stake and a seat at the table.
That's great work. I've worked with Andre Wallace before he was actually in politics. He became a councilman, and then it was a mayor after Richard Thomas for a few months. But his company did a lot of that work, teaching them construction and the core curriculum and OSHA 10 and 30 and the flagging and all that. And I know I went with him, and I was covering him meeting with a couple of the developers, and he was even going a step further. They were going to protest in front of the bill, if they wasn't going to bring people in. And we was scheduled to protest, and say that was Friday. They got a call Wednesday that they wanted us to come in and have a meeting with them. And then they realized that he was training them. He felt better because that's what they said. The city will throw people at them that are not qualified and have no training, but he had trained them, and it was certified and everything. And, they couldn't deny that. So they had took a lot of his students and graduates, including my partner, Damon K. Jones. His son actually worked on one of the buildings on Gramerton for over a year or so, after graduating from the class. So I saw him. I know how important that work is. And still they try to run around even when you do bring them qualified people, you know what I mean? And they tried to, they brought them in, and, they were getting into the union, but they were trying not to pay them union wages and let them get into the union. And I'm familiar with some of that, having worked with Andre Wallace, like 2014, 2015, 2016, when he was doing a lot of that work. Yeah,
it's a real challenge. And so, that is the work that we've been engaged in, is really just supporting MWBE, supporting, local communities to figure out how we can, again, have we love you too, Jasmine. Figure out how we can get a seat at the table and a bigger stake. There's a lot of money coming in. I mean, billions of dollars in the clean energy industry here in New York, trillions of dollars across the country in infrastructure. How do we make sure that we're participating in that? And, that is the work.
And I was just I was honored Friday with Impact, the Metropolitan people and communities, and they honored two heads of unions, and they were talking about this. They won't, these developers are coming in, doing all this work, won't use union labor, won't use local labor. That's becoming a problem, and that's in Yonkers. And I'm like, and I said in my speech when I came that that's not just a Yonkers problem. This is happening all over, because I know they're doing it in Mount Vernon. I know they're doing it, the projects in New Rochelle. Some of that they had some of that going on, and so I wanted to speak that I heard them. I wanted to let them know I heard them, and the importance of union labor. I mean, and that union labor, but local labor as well. You know what I'm saying? Because when you first get out of the training with yours, I'm assuming they don't automatically go into the union. You know what I'm saying? So they have to work a certain amount of time. They get in the union, which doubles their salary. They can go from like $18, $20 an hour to like maybe $35, $40 an hour or something like that. At least I don't know if the prices have went up since 2015, but that's what it was then.
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on the role, right?
Right.
There's laborers, there's journey persons, there's all different roles. But I'll tell you, so my business partner, I wish he was on, because he could talk a little bit more about this. But one of the first training contracts that we had was with Youth Action Youth Build. It's a It's an organization based out of Harlem, and they're a direct entry program into the union. So the Youth Build model is a national model. It's very well recognized. And as you mentioned, they teach the NCCR core skills.
Right.
They teach them the OSHA. They give them their HSC GED with the goal after they finish this almost like 10 months of programming that they're going to get fast tracked into the union. But we were finding that the unions were not hiring some of the participants, right? For a number of reasons. You could call it nepotism. You could call it racism. You could call it just hiring freezes, not enough money, not enough projects. But we were finding participants weren't getting access to the union in the way that we were hoping they would. And we started then trying to take on projects to give the participants work. We found that not to be the right model. So that's where we started doing these collaborations with a lot of contractors, better understanding what the contractors were looking for. So those who were non-union, who were what we call open shop, what were the skill sets, what were the exact certifications, the trainings that they would find valuable, so that these participants weren't having to wait for the unions to call, right? And so we're open. We're a little bit agnostic. We love the unions. I think that it's an amazing thing to be able to have organized labor. But I think it's also important for people to be able to put food on their table.
Absolutely.
And so we design our training programs around kind of where the industry and market need is. And so, we continue to just want to push and advocate for people to get their hands on training and get themselves involved in the industry. Because once you're involved, it's easier to make that pivot towards the union if that's ultimately where you want to go. Hard to come in when you have zero experience whatsoever. So if you have to get your feet wet and kind of build up your profile in the open shop and working non-union, do that, get the skills, and then if you want to go union, the opportunities will open up as you get your experience.
But even the non-union, it was like 1820, like it was definitely a step up than a lot of people were, entry level jobs that you would get, without the skill set.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
So Paul, Lisa's here. I'm gonna let you introduce Lisa. She just popped in. You're muted.
Sorry about that, AJ. It always has to happen during these conferences. So Lisa Burton, she is a citizen activist, a proud 50-year resident of the city of New Rochelle. She's a member of New Rochelle Against Racism, also known as New Roar, a multicultural, multiracial, multi-generational group that meets weekly to discuss and organize issues around race in the city of New Rochelle. She became an accidental environmentalist after the city of New Rochelle voted this past June to establish a drive-through business adjacent to multifamily housing and a specific carve-out of single and two-family housing. And this happened after the city of New Rochelle passed the declaration of a climate emergency. So they declared a climate emergency, but then put this Starbucks drive-through in an area that's going to really devastate the public health of people within that proximity of those emissions. So I'm really happy to have Lisa here. I know Lisa's two sons very well. AJ, I know AJ, Alex very well. He probably dunked on me a couple of times, but I'm really happy to have you here, Mrs. Burton.
Thank you, Paul. Hi, AJ.
Hey.
6 degrees of separation,
Yes.
always. And Dwayne, how are you as well?
Now, wait, can I stop you? Are you the one that was on the Women's Month program?
Yes.
Was having a long conversation and was like, "Oh, and I know your mother, Pat." And that was you?
That's
Okay.
me.
Okay. I just want to make sure. My mom passed in 2014, so anybody who knew her, and I'm going to pick your brain about some stories later off air. But
Yes, we're definitely. I owe you an email, but I've been busy. Lots of things going on with New Rochelle, and thank you for hosting this forum, because it's often underappreciated how the generational impact of environmental racism has in our communities. It's like a death by 1,000 cuts. And that's pretty much how I have come into this conversation and into this work. Because I don't know if you know New Rochelle, but if you drive down Echo, where the old Pizza Hut is, you can see people's windows. People's open windows, because it's on Fountain Place, the apartment building is a walk up. So you can't have even air conditioning because it's an emergency family shelter. You could see the basketball courts and the picnic tables for seniors for New Rochelle Municipal Housing. You could see the windows for the people for New Rochelle Municipal Housing. And this is where they want to put a drive-through literally 10 feet from where people's windows are. And Starbucks their drive-through, they say it takes 5 minutes from the time you put your order through to get out. And
Yeah,
apparently
that never works. That is
right. It's if you only want like an iced coffee, maybe it will take 5 minutes. But if you want anything else, it takes considerably longer. So, I was sitting there at the corner and I was like, you do not have to be a scientist to know that this isn't right. It's basic common decency that what you would not permit your grandchildren and your grandparents and your spouse and your kids to be exposed to that level of air pollution, sound pollution, noise pollution, somehow is magically okay next to according to the city of New Rochelle, next to multifamily housing. And it just happens that it's in the heart of what was once Pugsley Hollow, which is a historically Black community dating back pre-Revolutionary War. And so, just briefly, I just want to say that, in undoing racism, part of the tenets is to know the history. And when we started looking at the history, and we still have people whose homes were razed that had lived on Harrison Street and lived on River Street. Everyone calls the Bracy apartment the Hollows because Pugsley Hollow was the Black community where St. Catherine's was, where the first Black elementary school, segregated school, where 300 freed Black families lived before the Civil War. It's also where they put the rail yards, where they put the gas tanks for the gas lines for downtown.
Wait, so St. Catherine and Lincoln's was not there? It was there?
Yep.
Okay, I'm from. I've attended.
And the thing is that all of this information is public record.
Wow.
It's public record, and we.
Well, you know what they say: if you want to hide something from us, put it in a book.
There you go.
At least that's what they say, and they've been saying for decades and centuries.
All I say is that we have collective amnesia. It's never. Actually, they act as if the price of poverty is living in an unhealthy environment. That's the price of poverty, as opposed to the price of being Black in New Rochelle is that your community and your neighbors are constantly under assault. So there are two narratives, unspoken narratives, and we just need to get the word out.
Yeah. So you said if I'm familiar with New Rochelle, so the little disclosure: in my youth, my misspent youth, I spent a lot of time in New Rochelle with my cousins Richard Dixon and Peter Rogers, and I'm a graduate of UCLA, the University of corner of Lincoln Avenue. So yeah, I know New Rochelle, and I used to go to St. Catherine, and my stepmother, my dad lived in 33, and so I was that whole area. I know all of that well. So yeah.
Yes, so I guess since we heard a little bit from Dwayne, I'll first give our question to you, Mrs. Burton, and then you'll give the floor to Dwayne. I guess it is, what are some of the challenges that Black people face within that are in the environmental justice for activism? What do they face? What are some challenges that Black EJ activists face?
Well, number one, I think when you talk about climate activism or environmental activism, and certainly the green space is mostly white people, that you do not see a diversity of interest. Part of it is, if you're trying to make ends meet, you're really not going to buy box water at $1 more than you would say bottled water, if that is your choice, right? And also there's not the outreach, and the language is different. In the same way, healthy eating was put out there, and yet organic food is 3 times the price of non-healthy food. and yet there was no conversation in the spaces where people were trying to change the movement. So when you're talking about challenges for African Americans or people of color in that space, we're not included, and they don't notice that we're missing, and I think that's the biggest problem.
I agree with that as well too, because I've been attending a wealth of these environmental conferences, and I could count on fingers on my hand, people of color. AJ, a lot of them I see, the only person of color I see is Marvin Church, and things like and his wife Diana, and it's unfair because a lot of the development, especially in terms of conversation of environmental justice, are in communities of color. So,
shout out to Marvin Church. He was tuned in earlier. I believe he's still watching now. So shout out to Marvin Church and Diana.
Yes, yeah. So I guess next we'll go to you, Mr. Dwayne. Do you want to talk about some of the challenges that Black people face within in environmental justice activism?
Yeah, for sure. I obviously agree with everything Lisa just shared. I think there's also been a lot of misinformation. I think that there has been, this sense that, what is being done in Black communities was not really a threat or a problem. And I think, there was a period where you had to kind of bring people around to the truth of lead paint and the high rates of asthma and just some of the things that were being experienced. So I think that was just a disregard for the truth. I think then there was a lack of access. So as she mentioned about, being included, when you don't have a seat at the table, you don't really have a say of, what's going to be for dinner. And, we're kind of in that space where if we're not in the city council meetings or in the board meetings or being a part of some of these of legislative bodies, then we don't have a sense of really how to make sure that policy is spread fairly and that everybody is being accounted for and considered when policy is being drafted. I think for activists is also resources. I think that, raising money around the issues of environmental justice is also not an easy thing to do. So therefore it makes it harder to spread your message and to get the word out. Whereas she noted some people may care, but it may not be top of mind for them. When you're thinking about how you can just survive day to day, thinking about the choices you're going to get for water, or thinking about, whether the water in your building is properly clean, or whether, the lighting could be upgraded, or the types of heating systems that are being used are affecting the air quality indoors. I think all those things are things that we would like to think about, but when you're day to day just inundated with, debt, trying to get by, it's hard to make it a priority. And so I think resources for organizations that do this work at a high level, making sure that they're well equipped so that they can advocate on our behalf, I think is just a big need. Because everybody day to day may not have the time, but those who are passionate about this work should have the resources. They shouldn't feel under-resourced or undercapitalized to go out and advocate on behalf of our needs. So I think it's definitely a combination of all those things.
Thank you so much, Dwayne, and thank you as well for your information, Lisa, as well too, because these are very important conversations so that we're able to help cultivate people to be prepared for these trials and tribulations that historically have been existing within the space. Because it's kind of like it's a thin needle you kind of have to tread, because not only are you trying to support the communities at large, in terms of these environmental issues are going to impact all of us, but we have to make sure that we're able to help empower the people that resonate with us to be just as effective as we are within the space and the entire movement. I'll go into our next question. And one of the things I want to mention, AJ, in terms of soulful synergy, the great work that they're doing, it takes environmental justice, but also puts the economic justice agenda narrative that's in there, because it's really about the economic opportunities and expanding those to people that historically not have had those options, especially if these are alternative career ways, while people are discovering what they want to do in terms of higher education. Because not everyone has to go to college. There are some job opportunities you can immediately be qualified for. And this is amazing work that they're doing. And that kind of goes into the next question I wanted to ask.
Before you do that, though, I just, everybody who knows me, so Dwayne, you don't know me yet. Just so you know, I love that quote. If you don't have a seat at the table, you can't have a say what's for dinner. And if you read that in a future editorial of mine know that I stole it from you. Just I love that. Say like I am incorporating that. I love that. So I just
I think I just made it up. It might. If somebody could tell me where it came from, please do. But I know.
Okay, well, I'm going to be using it. I'm going to be using it a lot lately.
I know other versions of it. You know, when they don't give you a seat at the table, you bring
but
your own.
I never heard that particular version.
It just came off the top, man. You know, Sunday.
Yeah, well, I might quote attribute it to you the first 2 or 3 times, then I'm gonna own it after that. I'm just letting you know. So
that's all right. That's how we share. That's how we share in the culture, brother. That's how we do
it. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah. So in terms of our needed red, black, and green economy, what does the green economy mean for Black people? Dwayne, if you want to take a answer first. And Lisa as well, because historically we've seen people have gotten money with the degradation of our communities. So what does this opportunity mean for our people?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is the whole concept of environmental justice. Is they've made tons of money off of the backs of our communities, right? Putting up all the waste transfer stations and all of the high rises and these things that cause the pollution, in our areas, our urban areas, and giving us nothing for it, right? We take the brunt of the harm and none of the benefits. And so this stage that where we're at, there's a lot of talk around rectifying that. There's a Justice 40 initiative at the federal level. There's the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act here at the New York State level, essentially saying that 40% of the investments from the state are supposed to go into these disadvantaged communities. And they've come up with different ways that they've kind of determined what constitutes a disadvantaged community. But a lot of it is around, economic status and the current environmental conditions, et cetera. And so we want to make sure that we have a say in how those resources are being spent and allocated. And that's kind of what Raya was alluding to previously, is that they're going around the state and having these council meetings. The Climate Action Council is having these hearings and sayings, and we need to have a seat at those tables to really make sure we understand what's coming, to really make sure that we can have a say in how these resources are being allocated. Our training program, as I noted, has been funded by NYSERDA, which is our New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. It is a training that we are proud to be able to offer for free. So we applied to NYSERDA for funding with a number of partners, Con Edison being like our industry partner, but Willdan being like our lead contractor partner. So they've helped to inform our curriculum and make sure that it's aligned with what employers are looking for. And then we have a number of MWBEs or minority businesses that work on the program. My company specifically leads the outreach and recruitment, as well as the job placement support and giving participants the resume writing, cover letter, career road mapping skills, interview prep skills that they can be viable in the marketplace. And so the training is really focused on that. We know that a ton of our buildings need retrofits. A ton of our buildings need energy audits. They need upgrades. They need work to be done. And if we're not trained to do that work, somebody else is doing that work, right? It's going to happen. The 40% of investment is coming to our communities, whether we want it to or not. It's ideally been allocated and earmarked for our communities. So we either going to have a stake in how that money is allocated and how those resources are distributed, or we're not. And so our training program is really focused at making sure that we're recruiting a diverse group of participants. I think about 80% of our participants who have taken our training over the last 3 years, which is about 320 something people that we've graduated so far from that Clean Energy Academy are minorities. We predominantly are recruiting people who normally wouldn't have a say or wouldn't have access to this type of training. And that's something we're very proud of. Up and through December, we're about 78, almost 80% job placement. We just graduated 3 more cohorts for this year of about another 60 people. So we're in the process of getting them jobs and getting them, access to employment. But that is something that we're very passionate about, of making sure that we, again, have the workforce, the labor force who can work on these projects, who will be part of this green revolution, this clean energy transformation that we're having, and making sure that we do have that seat at the table. And so, very proud to be doing this work, but we know there's still a lot to do. And I think that's part of how we're going to get some economic powers. Again, the investments are coming. We just need to make sure that we're reaping the benefits. And when you're making $60,000, $70,000 a year compared to making 30 or 40, that's an economic change for you and your family. When you're a contractor on one of these multi-million or billion-dollar projects, I mean, that's a huge economic change if you can get an MWBE to be a prime or to make sure that they're having a stake in some of this development work. These are the things that we have to be focused on in order to get the economics to then fund the type of environmental justice organizations we want to fund, or to be able to have the funding to put people in seats like a Jamal Bowman or, a Gary Chambers, to have somebody in positions of power at the legislative branches to be able to advocate for us and support us. So I think all of these things matter. And sadly, when we're in this capitalistic society, it comes down to money, and we need to make sure that we have money to be viable in all these areas and spaces that we care about.
Absolutely. I just want to say two things real quick. So I'm learning, like, the environmental justice is not a term that I've used often, but everything talked about in the show today are topics we heavily cover. So I'm going to have to start using the term environmental justice more, so that, even putting it in my vocabulary and to it trickles down to, our communities, because it's not a word we use in our communities, or we know that that's what this is. And secondly, it's important that y'all do have a seat at the table, because sometimes when they say minorities and certain money goes to minorities, it goes to white women who are minorities, and this still doesn't go to black and brown people. So y'all having a seat at the table can assure that the money is going to black and brown people. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of these times the bulk of the money goes to white women, and they've covered their minority as far as they're concerned, So I just want to put that out there.
100% right.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Dwayne says, and also, AJ, you're right. We need to have a really clear understanding what environmental justice means, because it's not just about, yes, the lead shouldn't be in the water and the lead shouldn't be in the paint. It's about repairing the damage that was done systematically, with great intention. You don't redline a community and make a commercial so that garages and gasoline stations can abut private, residential neighborhoods. You don't do that unless you don't care about the people who are there. So part of the federal program is, and the notion of environmental justice in that space is that it's the cumulative harm that has to be addressed, and that there's a reporting feature. The teeth behind it is the activism that has to happen right now. And so when we talk about dollars and cents, it is, the basic tenets of the American economic system was Black people were the capital in the capitalist system. That's just the way it was, right? So and we remain in that space. We remain in that space when certain things have to happen and don't necessarily have to include us. When people can make money off of us, either through the prison system, through the non-education system, through the injustice system, and certainly within the space of environmental justice, where you don't have to live up to certain standards because Black people are involved. So that is what the fight is. At the same time, what do they call success? Success is preparation, and when preparation meets opportunity is success. So, Dwayne and his group, they are doing a phenomenal job at letting our young people, and when I say that, I mean everyone under 40, letting our young people have an opportunity in what is going to be the next 50 years at least, transformation of our country into sustainable energy. The gas is running out, so they want homes to be electrified because the gas is running out. If you want a new building, Con Ed has no gas lines, right? So things are changing, things are happening, and people have already put into place plans for the next 50 years. And either we're going to be included or we're going to not be prepared to be included. So we need to talk among ourselves and talk about what are the sustainable jobs, what are the good paying jobs that will allow people to live in dignity, to take care of their families, to present opportunities to their children. What do those careers look like? And it does not mean that you have to be a doctor or a lawyer. It's opportunities that we don't even know about. When I went to college, there was one computer. You had to wash your hands to use it. And you had to have like this. I mean, It was crazy. But if someone had told me the job to have in the future is coding, it meant nothing. It would mean nothing to me. But now we know that we need to be resilient, we need to be really flexible, and we need to have our ears to the ground to what these opportunities are and embrace them. And, even if you don't understand necessarily what green tech means, most people will understand that a $60,000 job will get you something substantial, something that you can save, make, save, and move your family forward. So it is incumbent on all of us to have those conversations in all the spaces that we occupy, in the barbershop, at the church, at the PTA meetings, at Little League, at flag football, wherever we are occupying our space, we need to talk to people about this and be part of the sea change that is coming.
Agreed. I will be proud to say that we partnered with Westcop. They're on Lincoln Avenue. So Daniel Bonet, his team there, embraced our training program. So we launched in January. We applied last year for funding from NYSERDA, were awarded, and launched in January a training for heat pump training. So we are training people on HVAC technology and heat pumps so that they can be aware of where a lot of the funding is going. Like, you kind of, in this clean energy space, I don't want to say follow the money, you got to follow the passion and the work, but you can also pay attention to where the incentive programs are going. So whether it's from Con Edison or NYSERDA, there's a heavy push towards getting more heat pumps into our homes and into our buildings. And so there's a lot of incentive program money around that. And so we were training people to understand how to be able to do those types of energy audits, to understand the paperwork and the calculations associated. And it is technical work, as Lisa was saying. It does, computers are very part of it. Understanding the different technologies and how to connect some of these systems is part of it. There's a lot of smart technology. If you are a person who likes computer sciences, there's a lot of things that you can use with smart controls. There's different ways to participate in this industry, regardless of your background and skill set. But that training program that we launched with Westcop is to train 125 participants over the next year or so. And so we do welcome people to join. That's a very local New Rochelle program that we want as much local participation as we can possibly get. So please be on the lookout for that. You can visit our website at cleanenergyacademy.org or contact Westcop for more information. But that is definitely something we want people to be aware of, that these technology jobs pay well. The average rate, as according to NYSERDA's Clean Energy Industry Report, is between $60,000 to $70,000 a year average. And about 2/3 of the participants in the clean energy sector currently have no college degree. So, it's a place where you can get your foot in the door and build your nice career, low barriers to entry. And we feel like our training program sets people up very well to move into this industry confidently.
I think that's very important. I've had the conversations with Marvin Church, and Andre was also working with Westcott. That's the guy I was telling you, Andre Wallace. These conversations don't usually happen in our community. So when these new type of jobs come along and the training, especially in the beginning when the training is free or whatever, we don't know about it, and we often sometimes don't take advantage of it. And then once it becomes saturated, then we're trying to get into, we find out later, and then there's a cost involved, and it's you got to jump through hoops to get involved, and it's already established. And I hope that Black Westchester plays somewhat of a part to get the word out when these kind of jobs are available, when these type of trades are available. We had the same conversation around solar when they were trying to do solar and the installation of solar, and they were going to train the people in the community to do the job, to do the solar. It didn't catch on, but these are jobs, these are careers. This is not McDonald's or Walmart or something. These are careers that you can get a house and a car and support your family and insurance benefits. And they're usually jobs we don't know about in the beginning. And I appreciate the work you're doing. And hopefully, and anytime that there's job opportunities or tests like that need to be taken, or training that's available, please shoot it to us so I can blast it out, so as many of us can take advantage of that, because again, we don't usually get that information. That's one of the reasons we started Black Westchester. The information does not trickle down. I live on South 7th Avenue, which is considered the hood in Mount Vernon. I live right down the street from the projects. The corner is 4th Street Playground. Most of these things don't trickle down on my block. Point blank. City Hall, the other mayor used to say, well, we do robocalls. Most of these people don't have house phones and they never heard a robocall ever. So the information is just not trickling down. So, we try to, kind of be the equalizer, try to get that information out. Michelle Brown from Greenberg, she said, is $60,000 a year for a 2-family household where both people are making $60,000? I say that because after taxes and 30% health insurance payments minimum, 10%, that's 40% of 60% and less than 24K bring home 36 is not including rent. I think we have to be honest about 60K, just my opinion.
I'm not going to sit here and say 60K is the end all be all. I also say it's an average. So, there's people making much more. And again, it's an industry where you can get your foot in the door and work your way up. You also have to think what that translates into in terms of hourly wages. So when you're talking about people making $20 an hour, they're usually making around 40, right? Mm-hmm. Somewhere in that ballpark. So you're talking $60,000 is a good $30 an hour job. And I'm gonna say, I'm not saying it's end all be all, but there's not as many people as you would like to know making $30+ an hour.
There's a lot of people that are not making $60,000.
There's
correct.
The average.
And some families might be making $60,000 combined.
In New York State, the average family of 4 makes about $70,000 a year.
Yep.
That's for the entire state. So yes, Buffalo is less expensive than Westchester, but that's a family of 4 for the entire state. So if someone can tell you that with a high school degree, a specific amount of training, and you can make 60, as opposed to what?
Yep.
What out? We have no retail in New Rochelle, right? So you have Applebee's. You can wait. You can wait 1,000 years to try and get a job at the city, but if you don't know somebody, that's not going to happen. Yep. You can try and be a cop, and even they do not start at 60. You could try and be a fireman, but they do not start at 60. So no, you're not gonna afford the nice house on in Pelham. No, not from this. But you will have a leg up and a starting point, and if you know something well enough, you can become a contractor, and then that presents a whole different set of opportunities that will lift you out of even the middle class. If you own your stuff, that becomes something entirely different. And we need to give as many people that chance, because entrepreneurship is not for everybody. Correct. And what Dwayne and Elizondo have done is phenomenal. But we need to at least give people the tools to start their own business, and that begins with know-how and knowledge.
It's hard to start.
Can I just say, we're talking 60,000 to start. That's not the ceiling, that's the
Well,
start.
I think 60 to 70 is average. So there's some people making 40, 50, and there's some people making 100 and something. What I was going to say, I am all for entrepreneurship. I run my own business. I've been in business since I'm 19 years old. I've never had a kind of full-time job. I've worked on commission and I've run my own businesses. I'm all advocate for it. It's hard to go into a business when you don't have experience, though. So to Lisa's point, it's like you can start in these roles and you can get a better sense of how the industry works, make your 50, 60, 70,000 for a few years, and then start your own business. But to come fresh out the gate into an industry that is so dynamic and is kind of evolving, is tricky. To that point, though, again, these are not end all be all in terms of salary, wages, or roles. You move your way up to project management. You move your way up into different roles, engineering. There's a lot of money, well over 6 figures to be made. I know people making a couple $100,000 doing basically program management for some of these programs, working with Con Edison. So there's big jobs, right? And again, you have to kind of get in, learn the space, and then know how to navigate and pivot. And we're also kind of at the tip of a lot of this. Like we're talking right now about, energy retrofits and energy efficiency. We haven't really gotten into the full breadth of solar. We haven't really touched on where wind is going. We haven't even started on electric vehicles. Like there's so much coming into this space with battery storage and reforming our grid. Like there's just so much that is still to come in this industry. So getting your foot in the door now as things expand and you become the subject matter expert or the resource that is 5 years ahead of where everybody else is when they finally, get the word, that's also going to put you in a big position to be that project manager, to be that leader. This is where it starts, in my opinion. That's why I've transitioned. My original career was in financial services. And I see the opportunity in the clean energy landscape because we need it. We need it to save our planet. We need it to make sure our communities are healthy. But the funding is there. The money is there. The economic advancement is there. The funding is already allocated. And it's something that they care about at the federal and state level. So, again, it's coming whether you want it to or not. It's just, are we going to have a seat at the table? Are we going to participate?
I want to add again, the reason for doing Black Westchester, what you just said, getting a leg up, and then 5 years before it's the thing. That's usually when we find out. 5 years later, when it's the thing, we don't usually find out when it's on the, in the beginning. And I appreciate what you're doing to get some of our youth. Like you said, what are your choices? If you come out of school and you don't have any education, you're working fast food, you can't even work in New Rock. I went to New Rock. I couldn't find nobody working. I was like, you go and pay for your ticket in the machine. Like there wasn't even nobody, when you buy the tickets, you don't buy tickets from people no more. So, they got very few people working in the theater. So, you couldn't, I think it's important as a starting point. And, who knows, you can go anywhere else, but a lot of starting points for someone coming out of school without a college degree, with a high school diploma. One of the few jobs you can get other than something like this is corrections. Like, you know what I'm saying? With a high school diploma, and that's it. You know what I mean? Like, you're not. So all our kids are not college bound, and we need to be a lot of them need to learn trades.
AJ, it's really about letting people know that there has to be a change in the mindset so that people can embrace what's in front of them. In terms of, we see this emerging economy. We see this going to come with tons of job opportunities, but how do we let people be prepared so it's a seamless transition in terms of being able to capture these opportunities, so that these are people, and especially what's important, that we have people like Dwayne, Lisa, Raya, and Blaze in the sphere so that people could say, hey, I can do what they're doing. It's like, when you get that book and you in the first grade, but the doctor is white and the medical doctor and the police officer is white, and they probably have the janitor as a person of color and things like that. These are things that had to be flipped, to let people know that if they're going to be leading this change in our communities, then we should be the people that are leading the change being implemented. And what these workforce development, my first job when I was in college, I was a seafood clerk at ShopRite in New Rochelle. I'm scaling fish, I got, I'm wearing goggles. I sometimes think, man, where would I be professionally if I would have been doing HVAC technician installations or, helping with heat pump installations at that age? What scholarships would I have qualified for? Because, it's different, when you have that full ability to brand yourself and make a profile as a student, where you're working, as a part-time job in the field, this is really opening doors, going to help people really position themselves for that true success that they want to see professionally. That's why, thank you, Dwayne, for everything that you're doing, as well as you, Mrs. Burton. I hope you're okay with me calling you Mrs. Burton. I don't want any problems with Alex and Chris, okay? So, I don't want to find you calling my mom at first day. What's wrong with you, Paul? Seriously, the work that you're both doing is very, very important, especially making sure that we're able to have these conversations. And it goes back to you, AJ, for giving us this safe space. I've been on a couple of EJ panels, but the environmental orgs that have been leading those discussions don't really have too much people like us at the helm or on the board of directors.
Lisa said something about success, and I want to speak about what Dwayne and all of y'all are doing. Like, I remember the old people used to always say, oh, I'm waiting for my ship to come in. And, they would never, this ship, and they'd say, ship. It's not that the ship never came in. They weren't in position when the ship did come in, or in position to recognize that it was their ship coming in. What you're doing is putting people in position to, as the saying goes, to be in position when the ship actually comes in, or to recognize that is the ship. And I think that is very important. And that, like you were saying, is what success is. preparation meeting
Opportunity.
opportunity. Yeah, that's what it's. You have to prepare. Like Black Westchester, I see a lot of things with media, how media is going. I'm working around the clock, to keep us in position. So when some of these things happen, we're there. You know what I'm saying? And we're not just get left behind like a lot of our media outlets do. You know what I'm saying? So it's preparation is very important. Those are my favorite words right now: preparation and position. So I appreciate all that y'all are doing. Go ahead, Lisa.
I just want to also kind of put a plug in for working. If there is a level of resilience, it's the same. When I went to college, you need a liberal arts education because that will allow you to think, which is critical, right? Well, being able to work on a project in a team, being able to understand what project management and timelines and supporting teams, that is invaluable. If you work in the green space, if you work in a bank, if you work for the Defense Department, those are skill sets that you can take anywhere. So what Dwayne and his group are offering is not just, I'm going to get a job. I mean, for some, that may be fine, but it's that opportunity and understanding of how you work collectively, how you work on teams, how you get a project done, what it means to go from a budget process to completion and go through audits and all that kind of stuff. That is the space in which he is training people in right now. And that will last you way past what we're doing now. And then my last thing to say, I just came in from O'Hare, and while I'm sitting in the airport, there's an infomercial about geothermal and how you should have this for your home. And we'll come in, we'll do this, and we have this contract, whatever the company is. It's and of course everyone that's on this infomercial was white.
Yep.
So they are changing things. Things are changing, and we can so easily be a part of it. We can easily be a part of it. But what it requires is everybody who's listening in and who will see this tape interview to find anyone that they know who's in a low-paying, frustrating position, who has a job and does not have a career, to tell them that they need to go to 95 Lincoln's, soulfulsynergy.org, cleanenergyacademy.org, and check it out. Because if you don't know what you don't know. And so now you know.
Lisa, so speaking of being part of the process, do you want to close us out with talking about this rally that's occurring in the city of New Rochelle on Saturday, April 23rd?
Yes. So last October we had an environmental trolley tour to basically bring to light the fact that the city is allowing drive-throughs next to multifamily housing, and in particular Starbucks. And so this for Earth Day, we are going to continue that conversation because it's never over until it's over. And we're going to start at the corner of Huguenot and Echo, where they are proposing this. We're going to have a bubble machine that will filter through the air, because they say that the way the winds blow, that will remove the pollution for the people who live there, which is the most unscientific thing one can ever say, but that's okay. So we're gonna have a walking tour of what was once a thriving Black community and is now a Webster drive-through bank, Taco Bell, Toyota dealership. We're going to literally walk the area and show people what was once there, talk about how it got destroyed and dismantled. And along the way, we're going to have various student groups who have real concerns about how things are working in the city of New Rochelle, whether it's single plastic use in our schools, or whether it's the lead water that it doesn't, you have to be a certain number before they can report it, but that number is not the number that is not toxic. and we need to have conversations about this, and we need to have a better understanding about when these zoning laws change things, what that means and what the true impact is, and how we as citizens have the right to protest and ask for a repeal. So it's Saturday, April 23rd, 3 p.m. We are going to be joyous. All of our action is joyous. The trolley, we got Dolly the trolley before. It was hilarious. It was fun, and yet there's a story that needs to be told. And too often we see things that are in plain sight. How many people have ever seen an apartment building adjacent to a gasoline station? A gasoline station that is not running for 1 hour, 2 hours, but is running for a full 12 hours. And in the summer, you can see the fumes rising, and no one says a word. We allow this to happen. We allow this to happen. And when you look back, it is old stock apartment buildings. It's not new apartment buildings, it's old stock. So someone decided that the people who lived there, it didn't matter that they are breathing in fumes, that the commercial interest trumped the lives of the people who live there. And the rest of us who see this and say nothing think, oh gosh, that's a terrible place to live. I'm glad I don't have to live there. And shame on us too. So yes.
Oh, no. You said, I was thinking, I said, a gas station next to an apartment building. My mother used to live on Union and First in the senior building, and right around the corner, it was a 24-hour gas station. Because while I was taking care of my mother, there's a lot of times I went to that gas 3 o'clock in the morning because it was the only thing open. It's a 24-hour gas station.
Right. So seniors need that type of air. You know what I mean? We see things all the time, and we don't see them. It's all hidden in plain sight. So our job as activists around this space is just basically to say, this is what's going on. We say in this community that everyone is important. We say in this community that we have a climate crisis. We say in this community that we want everyone to have an equal opportunity for success. And yet we allow people to live where the asthma rates are high, where the unrelented heat, where there's flooding issues, where the stress of not knowing whether your home is killing you or not is a real issue, and we're all okay with that. And I said we have a way of we live in a democratic society. We have ways of changing things, and we need to get on it.
Coming to the end of the show, last words, and if there's websites or social media you'd like to share so people can get in touch with y'all or follow y'all.
Yeah, do you want to, I guess you go ahead first, Wayne, because I know you plugged some stuff into our chat here. Do you want to share your information with our audience?
Sure, no problem. I think somebody had asked the website. So our Soulful Synergy website is soulfulsynergy.org. So soulfulsynergy.org. And that's where you'll find a lot of information about what we do, what our approach to community development is, and why we do the work that we do. So that's very important. Our clean energy training program is cleanenergyacademy.org, cleanenergyacademy.org. We have our next cohort running April 25th, which is going to be focused on thermal systems, which is building envelope, heating systems, and hot water systems. We also run classes on lighting, on HVAC, on heat pumps. As I said, we're building out curriculum around electric vehicles. So yeah, definitely encourage you to check out the website, sign up for a class if you're interested. And if you want to check us out on Instagram, it's @_Soulful Synergy. Happy to connect with anybody around any of these issues. So thank you for the time today. Really appreciate you, Paul. Thank you, AJ. Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate it.
So I'm actually following you on Instagram, Soulful Synergy.
I like it.
I just seen the picture. I seen the picture with y'all and Shane. I guess I saw y'all at Bowman's birthday party because I see the picture and I'm like, yeah, I was there and I think I seen y'all. So I'm like, yeah, but I'm already following y'all. I tried to follow y'all. I'm already following you on it.
Appreciate you. Yep. You guys have actually reposted some of our stuff in the past. So yep, I appreciate it.
I would say shout out to Bowman too. Shout out to Congressman Bowman, having him as our representative and leading. He's the Energy Committee chair for the House committee, the subcommittee energy committee chair for the House Committee on Science and Technology. Having someone like him there, it's really important.
Lisa, any last words? Social media, anything you want people to follow you? Or
I mean, we're on we have a little website. It's 2020 NewRochelleEarthDay.org is for our current action. On YouTube, if you look for New Rochelle Against Racism, you will find our environmental justice and environmental racism YouTube station, where we did some learning around the issues last year in the lead up to our trolley tour, and we continue to add posts, and our little news clip from our trolley tour is there as well. Yeah, if you look for News 12, New Rochelle Environmental Racism Tour, you will find us there as well.
I'd like to thank both of you and my other two guests for coming through. I'd like to thank Dr. Bob and Paul for putting this show together. Again, I'm going to have to add the terminology environmental justice to my vocabulary, because I do not believe so many things that we cover that have been talked about. We cover these topics.
Yep.
I never considered that environmental justice. And if I'm not considering that, a lot of people, again, it don't trickle down that's what that is to our community.
Can I make a suggestion?
Absolutely.
This gentleman by the name of Dr. Robert Bullard, he's what some would consider like the father of environmental justice. He made a study called Toxic Waste and Race at the 20. It's a 20-year study around exactly what we're discussing, which is, it's almost like redlining, right? Where they were chopping up districts as ways to put, certain housing and segregate communities. I mean, it's very much similar to what they did in the sense of environmental justice, of where they were putting, as she mentioned, gas stations or waste transfer stations or the landfills and the dumps, right? It's very intentional the way these things are done, and a lot of it is done through policy. So it's a really kind of important kind of framework to get your mind around, because it is all targeted. And that's why the racism component cannot be separated from the environmental conditions that we're living in, is because it's not accidental. It's not just, Black people don't take care of their community and they put trash everywhere, and that's why it's toxic. There's a whole combination of things that has brought us to this space. And so I think as you think about it, you'll understand that, again, it's very intentional. And so the only way we get out of it is with this intentionality. And that's why the terminology is so important, to really call the thing what it is, and to think about how we bring together these collaborative resources to affect change. So I'm glad that you'll be adding it to your arsenal, because it is, a very real thing that intersects with so many of the other things that you are already talking about. But just knowing how we got to where we are, I think will give you some additional framework for that conversation.
I appreciate that. And Michelle Brown, who asked about your website, she said, "Oh, I've actually checked out your website. Nice to put a face to it. Great work."
Thank you. We appreciate that. Thank you.
So I want to thank you all. Paul, any last words? I appreciate you coming through, co-hosting for the first time, doing your thing. Don't be surprised if I call you back in a month or so. Be like, we need you to guest co-host again. Very good job.
Only if we're talking about the environment, if we're interviewing Black people, AJ, you'll have my full support, because it's really important that we have this conversation on a Black forum, so that we can have the freedom to discuss what we need to share with our fellow brothers and sisters in the community.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you all. This has been a discussion on environmental justice, a word you will be hearing come out of my mouth, and I will be writing a lot more about, because we cover a lot of these topics. These are things, as I said, I didn't know that fell under the umbrella. I didn't know so many of these things fell under that umbrella. Environmental justice, I don't know, I was thinking about green stuff, green and green, just that's what I was thinking about, the environment. I wasn't thinking about in terms of all the things that were talked about today. And Raya talked about a lot of stuff Raya was talking about. I covered all of those things. So shout out, thank you, Raya and Blaze, Lightfoot,
Jones.
Appreciate both of y'all for coming through. And until next week, that's it. And shout out to Congressman Jamal Bowen. We did a special episode earlier on the young lady who was stabbed in Mount Vernon. And one of the people tuned in the comment room said, "Yeah, somebody need to call Congressman Bowman. Do you got his number?" And he was watching. He said, "Send me the link." And he just came on and answered with the person and addressed the situation and answered it. You can see that the conversation we had earlier on blackwestchester.com, and this also will be on blackwestchester.com. If y'all ever feel, the two of you, I said to the last two, if you feel, I don't know if y'all are writers, but if you feel the urge to write something that you feel needs to get out to the community or communicate this in some kind of way, open door. I'll run it on the website and the newspaper. I need it to come from people that know what they're talking about, so instead of articulating what I heard you say. So, but we need more of that stuff in our papers and our websites so we can get the word out. So please utilize us if you feel free. Lisa, I'm expecting to hear from you.
Yes, you will.
Yes. With that being said, you've been tuned into Black Westchester Presents, the People Before Politics radio show. We're on every Sunday, 6 to 8, streaming live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. This episode 335. Until next week, peace.
22 million black victims of Americanism are waking up, and they're gaining a new political consciousness, becoming politically mature. And as they develop this political maturity, they're able to see the recent trends in these political elections. Any minority that has a block of votes that stick together is in a strategic position. Either way you go, that's who gets it. You're in a position to determine who go to the White House and who stay in the doghouse. You're the one who has that power. You and I have never seen democracy. All we've seen is hypocrisy. When we open our eyes today and look around America, we see America not through the eyes of someone who has enjoyed the fruits of Americanism. We see America through the eyes of someone who has been the victim of Americanism. We don't see any American dream. We've experienced only the American nightmare. We haven't benefited from America's democracy. We've only suffered from America's hypocrisy. And the generation that's coming up now can see it and are not afraid to say it. 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 And are not afraid to say it.